Hi dear audience, hope you would be fine. Today in this short video we would be talking about the cultural translation, whether the cultural translation is possible or not. And we have more three questions: that what is the relationship between the cultural translation and the issues of migrancy and the exile as well. The next question which we would be talking about is how newness entered into the world in relation to the cultural world. So this is the very interesting talk. Before going further into in details, first we take the relationship of the language and culture, and there are the theories. Some says that culture can be translated, and some says that culture cannot be translated. So I would be talking on the both sides that what are the perspective from which culture can be translated and should be translated as well, and what are the understandings or the positions through which culture cannot be translated. So we will be talking stepwise and answering those questions in the process in the our course of the discussion as well. So the very first understanding which we have to keep in mind, that is that language is a cultural phenomena. Every language, we call that, does culture come out of the language or language come out of the culture? One understanding, and my understanding is of the very same one, that means this one, that language is a cultural phenomenon. So where there are a lot of cultures, there are a lot of the languages. And even if we simply say that considers that the translation, whether the translation transmit the original sense and the emotions to that of the other languages, so the simple answer is that it is not possible. Though it may be very more appropriate, but it cannot be uh, accurate in the sense of the translation. We call it as the heresy of paraphrasing as well. Means when you paraphrase something, even from English to English, when you paraphrase something, you basically lose that impact, lose that emotional attachment and the sense which you already have with a particular situation. For example, if I say that we have a word hookah, H double O K A H. That is a very like this one, means up to this one it would be of made of mud. It would be coated, and the coated one, and in that we hold, this is our cultural situation. In that there would be a stick that would be hollow from the inside, and that would be dipped into that iron, mud made flask, and on the top of that there would be, like over here would be put on that tobacco, and then they would lit with this one, and on the one side is the tobacco and then there is the water, and from here they would be bringing out that smoke. That's called the hookah. Now the possible appropriate words in the English is that of the cigarette, cigar, and no the other one. So for example, if I write that I am taking hookah, and when you translate that into your own language, for example in English language, then this word hookah has no alternate linguistic word in that of the English language, because English language represents its own cultural words. One more word, we in our culture has samosas and the pakoras. This is our cultural trait, and it was a situation which was found in Pakistan and India. When the Britishers came over here, uh, they were unable to recognize what might be the appropriate word for these samosas and pakoras in the English, but they were not having any, as they were not having samosas and pakoras in their own cultural word, so they were not having the word. Word means the linguistic words. So therefore, they appropriated our that with that of the they means name those things that as the samosas and the pakoras. So I hope that as you are from Morocco, you might not be having this word samosas and the pakoras in your linguistic, in your cultural phenomena, in your culture. Samosas and pakoras are basically like that one of the sandwich. They are rolled one. There are the potatoes, potatoes, tomatoes. They are just mixed with paste would be there, and on the upper up there would be a sheet, and that is boiled into the oil. That's called a samosas. So you might have a sandwich. The word appropriate is the sandwich is appropriate, but you don't have the equal word of the samosas and pakoras in your own language because this situation is not found in your own culture. So, when language cannot be translated appropriately into another language, and similarly, one cultural word cannot be translated into another culture. So, your question is with that of the cultural translation. So, I have proved that cultural translation is not possible. So, this is one understanding. But on the other point, the other theorist says that uh, definitely we cannot translate in that sense. We cannot translate those emotions. But for example, but I made you understand what I mean. Means I took the word of the hookah. I took the example of samosas and pakoras. They might not be your cultural word, but through my translation, I make you to understand what does the mean by word hookah and samosas and the pakoras. I was having a friend from Ecuador, and he was used to speak the Spanish language. So we have a word called the Zalabari. Uh, One day it was falling snow, uh, and he asked me the question that do you have that some sort of snow falling or like this situation in your own country? I said that yes, but in our country, when the snow falls, particularly in my areas, when the snow falls, it falls like this one, not as the snow falls in our cool areas or are the some cold areas. Means in that snow falls like that of the rain, and it just moving like this one. But in my area, when the snow falls from the clouds, it falls in the forms of the means such a heavy snow pieces, and it hurts. Even it destroys the crops as well. It kills the animals as well. So falling snow from the uh, clouds, definitely they are the different at different places are different, but it can be made understand to the other one. For example, I don't know the climate of your country, but what I am saying, you might be knowing that what does mean the snow is falling from the, whether it is in this shape or in that shape, but you might be able to understand. So the other school of thought who considers that language, though cannot be appropriate, but to some extent it can clarify, it can transmit your message to the other audience. So as we are living in this this is the other understanding, that language can be translated, so culture can be translated. uh, at the same time, I stand on the next as well, that in the post-colonial world, when we are living in a multicultural situation, uh, and at the same time, with the relation of the migrancy, diaspora, and exile. So, when an immigrant, a post-colonial immigrant, migrates to the Western world, he he is unable to translate his own culture into the Western world. The reason is not that culture cannot be translated, the reason is that the dominant culture of the Western world basically delimits or creates the limitation for our culture. uh, we over there in the Western world act as a minority. So minority culture can be translated, but if the atmosphere over there is that of the very friendly, but as you know, the dominant culture always deters or marginalize the localized culture. For example, if an African is living in some European country, or for example in America. So thousand population means, we just take an example that the thousand people living around him are of a certain particular Western culture, and a person, an African, an Indian, who is from the other sphere of that culture. So, how possibly he would be practicing his own culture in that dominant culture? For example, even though we were the Muslims and we were having a mosque over there in our city, as I was when I was living in England. So we used to wear our own cultural clothes on the day of Juma, on Friday, and but the people around us, they were definitely of the other wearings, of the other cultures, of the other language. They used to look at us in a very strange way, that what sort of the people. So definitely even we feel strange at that time, that what sort of cultural traits are the dress codes we are wearing about. So if we uh, take about that cultural translation and the issues of migracy, diaspora, and exile, uh, our culture cannot be translated if the existing population, that they are not friendly with us. But if they are friendly to us, they are multicultural and they own a respect for that of the multiculturalism, then we would be making, means bringing our culture, and we would be translating our culture into that dominant culture. So when an immigrant or a migrant over there feels a sense of shame with his own culture, and he cannot represent, means he cannot exhibit his own local culture into that of the dominant culture, Western culture, then definitely he attaches a sense of shame with his own personal culture, and he abandons the practices of his own culture, and ultimately he uh, quits his culture and submits himself to the Western or the dominant culture. So migrant is supposed to be at the edge and the verge of the transition as well. uh, but if large population, just to the question that cultural translation can be translated or not, if a large population, for example, I may give an example, that a large multicultural, London is a multicultural city, and a large population from South Africa, from Ghana, from Ecuador. They have been migrated to the England, and they are residing in their own particular localities. So over there, they are translating their culture, they are mixing their culture, they are practicing their cultures. I have seen a lot of people in the London who have been just wearing their own cultural traits because they were much more in number as well. But even if a single person is just moving among the millions people, then definitely he himself would be feeling a sense of shame with his own culture, and his culture cannot be translated as culture at large population with a large of practitioners can be translated, but not with a one or two persons. And diaspora, about that sense of the diaspora we have already talked, that when two different cultures comes into contact, then there are the four possibilities with that of the culture interaction of the two cultures. One is the separation, sorry, assimilation, marginalization, separation, and there was the fourth one as, so I forgot that. Assimilation, separation, marginalization, and other is that of, I think, like, that was a model proposed by JC Alexander. Sorry, no, that was proposed by JW Barry. You can look at that Google as well. What are the four possible proponents at the time of the culture interaction, two cultural different interaction of the two different cultures. So, if the upcoming culture is considered as a threat for the existing culture, so the people of that area or the locality, they create a sense of discrimination towards that of the upcoming culture. So, our next interesting question, which is that of the newness enters the word in relation to the cultural translation. That's very interesting. And that's basically the logic which proves that might be regarded as a drive that there should be the cultural translation, as this newness is beneficial for the humanities. uh, Definitely, cultures are not uh, cultures across the world are not that very lives in the shells, and we cannot protect our cultures as well. Keep in the mind, culture is such a fluid thing which always keeps on changing. We cannot keep our cultures safe from insides and outsides. For example, means if you are living in a very your own city, you might have seen that your culture, even in its own traits, have changed. Culture changes on the both ways. It changes in its own internal patterns as well, and it also get the influence from the external world as well. So you might be knowing that your own culture has transmitted or has revolutionized and evolutionized from the perspective of indigenous understanding, and from that of the international as well. Means international culture has also influenced our culture, and our culture has revolutionized and evolutionized itself from the inner perspective as well. A lot of our own cultural practices which are local, they have been changed. So culture changes on two perspectives. So this newness enters into the cultural world when we would be able to interact with our foreign cultures. For example, newness how? At the very start, I gave the example of the samosas and the pakoras. Though when the Britishers came over here in India, this word was not in that of their vocabulary. Uh, and now this word has become the part of their cultural trait. Sorry, if the not of that cultural trait, but that of the vocabulary, it has become the part of their language as well. Now they can understand what do you mean by the samosa and the pakoras. One more example which I may relate to you, that is a very COT cot. There is a word cot, COT cot. You may check it in your dictionary as well. And I hope that you would not be familiar with this word as well. We, particularly the Indians, have a cot, means it has four, like this one pillars, and this one, this is made of the wood, and where we sleep, that's called a cot. And that's very similar to that of the bed, as the bed has four legs. Similarly there is but bed is made of the that with that of from the inner side, that is made of the wood, or some sort of the sheet, and on that we have some that is made by some plastic woving. And you may see the images of the cot on the Google as well, and you in cot used in Indian culture, Pakistani cultures. So these words basically were the cultural words, but they brought newness into the linguistic changes and the cultural changes of that as well. I'm not. I am not of the opinion that only we are supposed to change the Western culture, but if we look that Western culture has how much they have changed our own culture. For example, you can take the sense of the pant shirt in Arabian culture. Mm, our long dresses have been replaced with that of the pant shirt. So this, the use of pant shirt, the use of technology, the use of English language has brought a newness and the new cultural codes and cultural practices as well in our culture. So definitely there is no doubt that newness enters in into the into the process of the cultural translation, and this is very much positive in the uprooting, upbringing, progress of the cultures as well. We cannot keep the culture into the shells, and definitely we cannot save the cultures into the shells as well. Culture is a fluid space; it has to move forward, and it always keeps on. Culture is such some sort of a sap which absorb the things from everywhere. So, but one more thing is that should I ask you a question? You might be living thousands and miles from my country, but why we are only interested and impressed adoption by the Western culture? Why not you or we Pakistani people are are inheriting the Russian culture and the Chinese culture? Why we are just focused, means we are running behind the Western culture, because Western, they have occupied the whole world and still they are ruling the world. Therefore, we are unconsciously are conditioned to uh, adopt the culture of our masters. As to our masters, we consider that they are the superior. Therefore, I might not be very much interested in adopting the Western, sorry, African culture. I might not be interested in adopting the Chinese culture, but I might be longing and I might be much interested in adopting the Western culture, as this culture I perceive it as, or consider it as a culture of superiority, culture of our masters. Therefore, uh, Western culture has a particular drive or attraction towards it from its marginalized people, means we the Africans, the Indians, and all that. With this, I think a lot of things are clear. Still, if you have a question, you may ask me. With this, goodbye.